This lesson is all about developing your tone on the saxophone. How do you get that really good saxophone sound? I'm going to give you the tools to be able to do this, so stay tuned. First thing I want to talk about is why a saxophone is an easy instrument to get started with, and why it's such a difficult instrument to build up a nice tone, a good quality sound. So first of all, let's talk about something called a simple machine. Gears, levers, pulleys, wedges, wheels, inclined planes. These things take difficult work and make them easy. Like for example, I can lift a car using a jack because for all intents and purposes, there's a lever and a fulcrum pinned up in such a way that allows me to be able to lift the car quite easily. In the same way, we have a simple machine on the saxophone that allows us to be able to get started very easily and very quickly with the saxophone. And that is your octave key. Your octave key is a simple machine. Now, how much easier the work is made for us is called mechanical advantage. I could give you a more scientific definition, but let's go with that for this video. How much assistance, how much help does this simple machine give us in order to be able to do a difficult task? That's called mechanical advantage. The octave key helps us play overtones very easily, fantastically easily. We have an incredible amount of mechanical advantage given to us simply by pressing our magic high note button. I've talked about this a little bit in other videos, but now we're going to get to the heart and soul of what's going on with the development of your sound. So when we want to develop our sound and our tone on saxophone, we have to render this simple machine, the octave key, virtually useless. We have to not depend on it. We have to do it all here and with our body and with our mind. So in this video, I'm not going to focus on breath support or throat control and voicing and what you're thinking and all of that kind of stuff, because there's no point in learning how to do all that stuff properly if you sabotage it soon as the air leaves your body. So in this video, we're going to focus on the mouthpiece and the reed and your embouchure. So what happens? What do we do to the air after it leaves our body? Let's talk about a lever and a fulcrum. This is a broom handle, and I have this very carefully balanced on my finger. My finger serves as a fulcrum that's used to balance this. This is synonymous with the kind of balance that we want with our reed in terms of how much pressure we put through, whether too much or too little. My finger is about halfway on this thing. Watch what happens when I add the heavy broom end to this stick. In order for me to balance this broom at the fulcrum, which is my finger, I have to move my finger a lot closer to the heavy end in order to create balance. This is really difficult to do. But my finger is a representation of my embouchure. My embouchure. My embouchure. So let's talk about a seesaw or a teeter-totter. If you have people of equal weight, they will balance out. If one person is really heavy, you're going to get this offset type of distribution here. This is the equivalent of us playing with a bad sound. There's too much of one thing on one end and not enough on the other. Instead of putting more or less weight on the ends, all we have to do is move the fulcrum. Now we don't have to add anything else to this system or lose anything from this system. This is directly equivalent to what we do with our embouchure. Our embouchure is the simple machine that we're going to use to replace what the octave key has been doing. Our embouchure is the simple machine that we're going to use to replace what the octave key has been doing. Those guys that can play with a fantastic sound, all they're really doing is just adjusting the position of the fulcrum in order to maintain the balance that they need with the reed. So many of you have been asking me, man, how do you use such low tip opening mouthpieces and relatively soft reeds to be able to play over 4 octaves on a saxophone? And a saxophone that's generally low resistance anyway. The answer is simple. I'm using the same technique that any one of you would use to lift a car using a jack. I've just learned to turn my embouchure into a simple machine that allows me to be able to play this way. And it's not just Altissimo. Altissimo is just an extension of overtone production. It's an extension of producing harmonics. So from a low B flat to the highest note you want to play, you're really just using the system of harmonics and overtones. The quality of that sound is going to be dependent on a lot of factors. So here, I'm going to give you a human octave key. Okay, let's continue. Let's talk about the relationship between the mouthpiece and the reed. Now, when we go to buy a mouthpiece, we generally look at what the tip opening is. But the tip opening is more than just the tip of the mouthpiece to the tip of the reed. It's actually the entire area under the curve. Calculus allows you to be able to calculate the area under a curve. So the amount of space between the mouthpiece and the reed can be calculated. We're not going to worry about that. We're just going to say long facing, medium, or short. So the tip of the mouthpiece is also related to how long the facing is. So you can have the same tip opening mouthpiece with a short, medium, or long facing length. If it's long, it's going to feel like the mouthpiece is more open because there's more area. All right, here's where things get really, really cool. Now, my fist is going to represent my embouchure. My fingers represent my top teeth. My thumb represent technically my bottom teeth, but my bottom lip. The standard way that we learn to play saxophone, we just simply add more pressure from the bottom lip. This will eventually just seal the reed and stop the tip from oscillating. This is a problem. When we use a lip out embouchure, we increase the amount of real estate that we can adjust the fulcrum, that simple machine that we use to make difficult tasks easier. We have all this space here that we can play with instead of using this closer part. If we can make the adjustments from back here, we don't seal this reed and stop it from oscillating. Whenever you see any videos, when they go to a close-up of somebody playing in the Altissimo register, you see them do this. Because they are freeing up the tip of the reed and allowing the fulcrum to be adjusted in such a way that gives you a mechanical advantage you need to be able to hit the harder notes to hit. I mean, that's really simple. Another aspect of playing this the standard way is, quite logically, if we want to play higher, we would generally get a more open tip mouthpiece, giving us more area under that curve, or we would just get a stiffer reed. Okay, so many of you have been asking me about how I can do all this stuff with low tip opening mouthpieces and relatively soft reeds. I've just learned to adjust the simple machine to move that fulcrum. Okay, so whenever we put the mouthpiece in our mouth, we are actually decreasing the tip opening of the mouthpiece. Because of our embouchure, we're actually pushing the reed up a little bit, decreasing that space between the tip of the reed and the tip of the mouthpiece. We're also closing off the length, the facing length of the mouthpiece when we do that. So we are inadvertently making all of our mouthpiece tips openings smaller. When we play with a much more relaxed embouchure, we can free up that space and not wind up putting any type of constriction that's there. A real advantage is being able to get the maximum amount of tip opening out of the mouthpiece that we have. Here's how things get really cool. When the mouthpiece and the reed are at rest, that is generally the maximum open position. However, the reed has momentum when it's traveling. So if we can relax the amount of pressure that we're putting there, we can get the reed to extend beyond that resting point. When the reed has a further length of travel, more air can flow through. When we have more air flowing through, the pressure decreases. That decrease in pressure allows us to be able to push the air through faster. So this is where we can get airspeed, which is by far one of the most confusing aspects of playing with a full tone, a subtone, and altissimo, and the whole bit. If we think about a garden hose with a bend in it, if I turn the water pressure up halfway, there's a lot of pressure that's in the hose itself. This equates to us as being a lot of back pressure. There's nowhere else to push it. I can't move it any more than what that pressure will allow me to do so. When I release that pressure, when I lower my embouchure, the reed can be open more. That will allow me to be able to turn the pressure up. That's what we need to do with our physical body to push the air through faster. So by playing with a relaxed lip out embouchure, we get the benefit of being able to move a greater quantity of air faster through the mouthpiece. All right, let's move on. Your low G and your low D are two notes that it's really obvious when you're using a straight tone and a subtone to play these notes to really shape your sound the way you want. I'm going to show you two exercises. The first one is going to focus on two notes, your low G and your low D. And we're basically just going to manipulate our embouchure to hear the difference between these two notes, from a straight tone to a subtone, to really thinking about really pushing the air through and not sabotaging anything with our embouchure. The other one is going to deal with your middle F sharp. It is the best sounding note on any saxophone, and we need to start cluing our ear into how that note resonates best. Okay, let's get to it. Notice the difference in pitch also. So when you're using this lip out embouchure, you want to make sure that you are tuning properly. I always tune a little bit sharp, play with a more relaxed embouchure, and then you center the pitch in the middle. Okay, low D. That's a really simple exercise that can really start to dial your ear into the subtlety of the sound, whether it's edgy, dark, bright, or whatever. So in general, you have dark, bright, and somewhere in between. And middle F sharp is the best sounding note on a saxophone. On tenor, I like to use 1, 2, 3, and the 6. I call this a flute F sharp fingering. This fingering is a little bit sharp. But I do hear that it resonates slightly better. I know it's very subtle. I don't know how well it's going to come across in this video, but I relax my embouchure more when I'm using the flute F sharp fingering. So from there, that's one of the main notes that I do as a warm-up when I really want to focus on making sure that my sound is where it wants to be. If I get a new mouthpiece, if I'm putting on different reeds, if I'm switching ligatures, hearing the subtlety within those notes. In the getting started with Altissimo for tenor saxophone, this fingering also works for alto, but that flute F sharp fingering is one of the first fingerings that you learn for producing overtones, because it overblows to an out of tune D, but you can add your palm key to that fingering and it helps to get the pitch together. But understanding what to do here is the same principle with that fingering, with all the stuff that I've been telling you. So let's do that. When I'm using that fingering, if my embouchure is too tight, I cannot get that note to overblow to the overtone. So I have to play with it relaxed. And then when I think about playing the overtone for that note, I'm thinking about moving that fulcrum forward. Relax embouchure, open. Very, very subtle movements with everything. That's why in that video, I'll post a link in the description. I'm slow walking you up through gradual degrees of movement with your embouchure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I got for you. So I hope I was able to give you a different insight on how to develop your sound, not sabotaging anything with your embouchure, because there's so many videos, everybody's saying the same thing. So I hope I could give you guys something a little different. All right, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Thanks for watching. See ya.